I was born in Wenatchee. It's a small town in the eastern part of Washington State. And yes, that town's name is Native American. My father's grandmother was from the Yakima Nation, one of the largest tribal nations in the Northwest. The Yakima have inhabited the land east of the Cascade Mountains for over 10,000 years. These were mostly fishermen that fished the Columbia and other rivers and traded for goods with other tribal nations. My family has a long history in eastern Washington. The rest of my family were settlers that lived on farmland, growing apples, pears, and cherries. Oftentimes, Native Americans would help work the farmland, and subsequently, my father's ancestors became farmers. My parents moved to Seattle when I was about a year old. And as a Native American, my father became an activist in the Northwest for Native American rights, and also worked for a number of tribes, along with being a part of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in the Department of Interior in D.C. One story I remember, I was probably 5 or 6 when my father was working as tribal law enforcement. A call came over his radio that commercial fishermen were in an argument with Native Americans fishing with nets, quote unquote, out of season. Now, Native Americans are allowed by treaty to fish year-round. So we rushed to the scene where there was a huge crowd. There were even federal agents there. My dad told me to stay in the truck no matter what and keep the doors locked. I was scared out of my mind. Now, my father was 6'7", so you can picture this man almost a head taller than everyone else, armed, surrounded by a mob of fishermen, tribesmen, human rights activists, police officers, and even federal agents, all in a shouting match over a catch of salmon. It almost turned into a riot. It was something I'll never forget. Throughout my life, my dad would also take me to powwows. These are meetings or celebrations between neighboring tribes. Aside from traditional clothing, tribes have their own songs, language, and even specific dances they perform during ceremonies. Songs are mostly drums and singing, and the drum beat of each song has specific meaning. 14 years ago, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and he died soon after. Although he wasn't full Yakima, because he had such a long history with the tribal nation, he was allowed a traditional sunrise burial. And a traditional burial ceremony is conducted in the tribe's longhouse, which, like it sounds, is a long wooden structure where the tribe gathers. The handmade pine coffin is placed in the middle of the longhouse, where ceremonial songs are played and sung, and people honor the deceased. The ceremony starts early afternoon, and everyone eats a traditional meal there. This is a last meal together with the person, as they believe the spirit is still with the body. The ceremony goes on all night into the morning, where the coffin is taken and buried during sunrise. Based on tradition, the person's name is not spoken and all pictures removed for a year so that their spirit can leave and be with the Creator and their ancestors. So since I'm part of Screenland, I have to talk movies. Until the 70s, Hollywood was always portraying Native Americans as savages who terrorized settlers. And they were played by white actors painted red-face. My father would always get upset when he saw an old Western show Native Americans that way. In 1970, however, Hollywood released Little Big Man starring Dustin Hoffman as a white settler's child raised by the Cheyenne Nation. It finally cast actual Native Americans and portrayed them as civilized people. But remember, this was only 50 years ago. Since then, more films have been released that portray the true culture of Native Americans. Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans, and even the recent Hulu film Prey have been applauded for accurately portraying Native American life and culture. So unfortunately, the history of Native Americans is filled with heartbreak and betrayal, and Native American rights and what's left of tribal lands, even today, are often under dispute. As Christians, this should give us compassion. We all desire unfailing love. I pray we can show love and respect and stand up for those less fortunate.